So we're carrying on activity 2, yeah? Surname, house number, and postcode. That's the customer table. In the design view, surname. So we have to click on surname. See, here is not null, and you must enter a customer's surname, yeah? So that's as far as this goes. It's very easy. Let's move this on the left so that we can have more space. You can see here, and then for instance for the house number it will be again is not null, so we go to the house number is not null, so we enter that, we type that. So for instance here we will say you must enter the customer's house number, and in postcode is not null, you must enter the customer's postcode. As far as the first sentence, that is done. Well, let's move on to the a record will not save if the postcode is not in the correct format. Okay, if we click on the postcode, in order to configure the format of something, there are two ways. One with validation. So for instance, if this was a phone number, if you remember, for the phone number we said and hash as many numbers as we had, I think 8 or 7. So at least in the exam I think we had 7, and in the beach database we had 8. So 5, 6, 7, 8. It won't accept it. The expression you enter is an invalid date value. It thinks that it's a date because of the hash keys. So basically we have to put what we said, double quotes, because it's a text. So what I showed you just now is about the phone numbers, not about the postcode, yeah? So let's get rid of this that has to do with phone numbers. I just gave it to you as an example for the phone numbers. So is not null is what we entered because of the first, this one here, record will not save without the surname, etc. But what we want to do now is enter something called input mask, and let me show you this. So for instance, you see here you've got a letter, yeah, a letter. The code for input mask in terms of letter is L. Then you have a second letter, E, yeah, that is L as well. Capital L doesn't signify capital letter, it just means letter, and it's an input mask, yeah? It's something that you probably have to memorize. A record will not save if the postcode is not in the correct format. So that's what we're trying to do. So here I added a postcode here, and I'm going to delete it after. And here I'm designing the input mask, something called input mask, for the postcode. So for letter is LL, 3, number is 0, space is space, then we have number 1, which is number, 0 again, that's the code for number, and letter capital L, capital L. Access adds this, yeah? This, you shouldn't worry about that. That means capital letter. So basically here we have an input mask. If you remember that capital L stands for letter and 0 stands for number, and if there are spaces or dots or whatever, you can just type that dot, you can just type that space. Then if you can see here, it's number again, and we put 0, and letter, yeah, and it's capitals. We add capital L's, not because this is in capital, but because they are letters and numbers, and the capitals, the fact that it is capital, we put a greater than in front. If we don't, we can type lower cases here, but we're trying to configure this correctly. That covers you for the postcode in the correct format. Is not null covers you for the first validation, and this covers you for the format, and you have to somehow evidence this. Let's delete now this. Don't forget, I just typed that, yeah, as a caption, so that's not valid. So we go back to datasheet view. If we enter our code, because of that input mask, remember we put it in the input mask field, I would suggest that you memorize this for the postcodes, and then you can implement it on any other field that has data that looks like this. So there's always a letter, there's always a second letter, there's always a third number, digit number 3, and there's always a space in there where the fourth letter would have been inputted. There's always space, you can see a space. In number 5 you always have a number, here you always have a letter, and here you always have a letter everywhere. And when you click here, you get this. This is the proof. See here that when you go to the beginning, and if you click a number, I'm typing 9 now, it doesn't accept it. But if you type a letter, I'm continuing now, it doesn't accept it. It wants a number. So see, you can experiment with this. The space is automatically entered, and then we type a number. If we type a letter, it doesn't accept it. You can hear the database protesting. 6, and if I type another number, so that is a format check. Yeah, that is a way to cover for that format check. There's something new, there's something remarkable about this. Now it won't accept this change, so you first press the escape key, and if the escape key doesn't work, then you have to find a way of closing it without saving, or finding that bold arrow and deleting the record that you've created. Now it says a record will not save if the event selected is invalid. When we hear invalid, we think of lookups. We go back to the tables, so it says event selected is invalid. Go to design view. Here we can have the event ID, which means that we can create a table lookup, and you see underneath it asks us for another invalid field. There will always be 2 fields that they're asking us to create a lookup in. So in this case we have invalid event, but here we have invalid seat type. The thing is that the seat type is in the sales table, and we can enter that as a value list lookup. So because it doesn't have anything to do with an ID. So this is something that you have to experiment and understand when you need a value lookup, as you can see here, or a table lookup. A value list lookup is the one where you enter in the lookup the data yourselves. A table lookup is one where you input the data from another table, so it's got to do with a foreign key. For instance, in this case, the event selected is invalid. I would put event ID along with the event name to show in that column, so I would be forced to draw the data from another table. That is too much to type, whereas this one, the seat type, is very easy to type in comparison, because it's just table or no table, just 2 fields. So have a look at how am I doing them. Event selected is invalid. It's talking about the event in the sales table, this one here, event ID. So if in the sales, while I'm doing the sales, I'm selecting the wrong ID, not in the event table, so this is not really helping you to understand in which table you have to enter it. Yeah, so it is this table, but you have to understand the reasons why. First of all, because if you remember, you cannot enter a lookup in a primary key field. Let's have a look. Can you actually do that? Look, lookup wizard. The lookup wizard doesn't apply to fields of this data type. As soon as you see this, you will understand that it's asking you to validate the event ID in a different table. Which other table has it? This one, the sales table, and it's here. So I go to the design view of it, I say lookup wizard. So you can't change the field size of this, which is part of one relationships. In your case, it might work without that database protesting. In my case, it's protesting, and I am forced to delete these relationships. Yeah, when I'm doing the lookups. So it is event ID with event ID here. I have to delete it. Now it won't, because the table is open. You see, all sorts of problems. So now I go there and I delete it. I go back to the sales table in design view, and again the event ID, lookup wizard, and now it's going to accept it. I want the lookup to field to get the values from another table. That's what we're saying. We use the type, the seat type. We will use this button, but for this one we will use this, so that we have one table lookup, which is the one that we're doing now, because we're looking for the data from another table, and then we will create the value lookup. I want the lookup field to get the values from another table or query. I say next. It's the events table. I say next. I just want the event ID. Or you can get the event description as well, yeah, because that defines the ID. Say next, next, and you unhide the key. You arrange the columns a little bit, and we can say finish here or next, finish. Say yes. And now when we go to datasheet view, we have a lookup here. But another thing that we have to remember is that in the lookup area, where it says limit to list, make sure that it says limit to list yes, because that is important in terms of foreign key. And when you take the screenshot of this, yeah, this line does not move up to get rid of this space. So you do this, and then from there you can arrange the length. You see, you don't hide, you can hide the gaps here by doing that when you take the screenshot. That is one lookup. That is the table lookup. And let's move on to the value list lookup, if possible. So that covers us for this. Our record will not save if the postcode is not in the correct format. We've done it. Our record will not save if the event selected is invalid. So here, you see, we had to decide. We saw the word invalid. So to make it valid, we create a drop-down list box from where we select it. Basically, we have a choice to make it as a table lookup or a value list lookup. We have to make one of each. So see, underneath immediately you have another lookup. So we decided that this is appropriately a value list lookup, and this is appropriately a table lookup. Okay, so seat type is invalid. Let's go for that. Design view, seat type, and the data in there is, if we look at the data sheet, seat type is table with a capital T, no table with a space here. This is just the data. Remember, the data can have space, but not the field names. Design view. So here we have seat type lookup wizard. I will type in the values. Let's have a look at the, it's table, no table. Yeah, here you can see here table. Be careful with spelling mistakes. And no table. Let's verify it. So you can have this printed out most likely, and you can check there. So you say next, limit to list, finish, something that I didn't do earlier. So if we go now to the lookup, table, no table, value list, you see value list, they're asking us for one value list lookup, value lookup, so value list, see value list, and the other lookup in the sales table, if we go to the event and we click on lookup here, table lookup, yeah, this is a table lookup. Select TBL event from the table, the event ID. That gives us an ID that this is a table lookup. And as well, limit to list, yes. Those are the things that are remarkable about this activity. Our record will not save if the number of tickets purchased is below the accepted range. So number of tickets, let's see what the scenario says. A sale cannot exceed 8 tickets. Yeah, there must be at least 1 ticket purchased with each sale. So no less than 1 and no more than 8. No less than or equal to 1, no more than or equal to 8. So first of all, let's do this. A record will not save if the number of tickets purchased is below the accepted range. Number of tickets in general validation text is not null. It has not asked us to make sure that this cannot be null, so you must enter a number of tickets. It just says that it has to be between 1 and 6. So this would suffice. So initially this could have been greater or equal to 1. So initially the validation rule will be like that. Once we move on to the second here, relevant validation, number of tickets purchased above the, so we have to go back to this and say and less or equal to 8. Yeah, so that would cover us. But there is another validation that we can use between 1 and 8, and then complete the validation text here. So we say must be at least 1 and no more than 8. So this can become as well either like this, so it's no problem with that, it will save. Yeah, and when we go to design view and we go to number of tickets, it's still there, but as well it can be between 1 and 8, and that is basically it. If we continue further down, it says input the data given in figure 1 into your relational database. We've already done this when we started activity 2. You have to evidence now your table structures and validation as screen prints using the given activity 2 RTF. I've done this already and I will show you immediately. These 3 are the table structures that it's asking you. Then it's asking you to take a screenshot for each of the table validations, presence and length check, for instance. If that is required, you can add, for instance, on the surname, you can add a maximum field size. You can count the and put a random field size length there to check the length. But what is mostly important, that there is presence check is not null, and it only asks you one example. So you pick up one and you enter it. Then, as you can see here, it's a value lookup or range check. Here it's the range check, not the value lookup. Here is the table lookup, the one where the event ID is imported from another table. See the TBL here, select, and it says limit to list, yes. They will look at these two things. And here is a format check, the actual input mask. See, that's something new that you have to learn. And that concludes, that will conclude activity 2 screenshots. It doesn't mean that where it says is not null for this one, it just needs one presence check, one length check. If you look at the requirements, these may not be together, they might be separate. So you can choose any other field as long as you've applied length to something. For instance, you could have done it on the postcode, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus the space 7. See that 7, size 7. And you could have presented that screenshot here as length check. Yeah, but you have to be careful. You have to be able to show the field which is involved here. See, it says surname here, it says number of tickets here, it says postcode here, yeah, and it's highlighted. It says event ID and it's highlighted. Obviously they clicked on it in order to get this on the lookup tab, yeah. And another screenshot here could have been the value list lookup, this one, a screenshot of this. So if we have the seat type, the lookup, this would be a value list, because you have here in the requirements you have value list lookup or range check. It's up to you, either one. The examiner does not look at the second example. You must put the one that you're sure that it is correct. But the problem is, when you test the data in activity 4, if you don't have all the validations that you're asked for, you won't be able to do the test for them. So that is something that you might gamble with. So be careful.